Okay, thank you, Chris. That's really interesting, really good. I know that the first part of my talk was going to be about, looking at failures, looking at historically what's gone wrong, because actually we can learn a lot, I think, from the recent failures, the Pretzos of the world and the Byrons. But Chris covered that really well. Thank you for that. My name's Andrew Bowen. I am a coffeepreneur. I'm a coffee shop consultant. I'm an author of a best-selling book, The Daily Grind: How to Open and Run a Coffee Shop That Makes Money. And with my wife, we run the coffee shop boot camps. Myself and Claire run every 3 or 4 months. We run the coffee shop boot camps designed for new coffee shop budding entrepreneurs who want to open a coffee shop but don't know where to start. People generally at the beginning of their journey, and that's working really well. We're hopefully planning another one now in June at San Remo, so watch out for that. So, because of my position as a consultant, I work with Allegra. Have you heard of Allegra, the guys that do the market research? We contribute to their annual survey. Every year they do the Cafe 2015, 16, 17, 18 research, which has come out. So tonight I'm just going to share with you some of the key points that I was fortunate enough to be invited along to the presentation just 2 months ago. So the data I've got is really quite up to date. So overall, the first question I get asked often is, when I say I'm a coffee shop consultant, I say, well, surely, coffee shop, the bubble's going to burst soon. I don't think it is. I think there's a bit of karma. So you've got the situation where you've got the pubs closing at a massive rate, probably, 100 a week, 50 a week, depending on what stat you look at. But for every pub that opens, a coffee shop will open because the market's changing. So, millennials are moving away from alcohol, healthy eating, all those things, all those cultural changes, all that cultural shift really plays into the hands of the coffee shop opening. So the overall coffee shop market is 9.6 billion. There's 24,000 coffee places in the UK at the moment, 24,000. Out of those, there is 7,500 branded coffee shops. So that are specifically coffee shops. So the big number is anywhere you can buy a coffee. So the Greggs, the Starbucks, the pubs. So that's the big market. But the independent and the branded chains account for 7,500 units, and that's growing faster than the overall market. The overall market is growing about 5% a year, but the actual branded chains is growing at 7% a year. And by the year 2020, I need to look at my notes here because the real numbers, the market is going to grow another 10%, and it's going to be over 6 billion. And there's going to be there's going to be 10,000 coffee shops as opposed to 7,500 now. So the market is still growing. There's still plenty of opportunity. There's plenty of headroom there. And 81% of people now visit a coffee shop weekly. 81% of people visit a coffee shop weekly, which is a phenomenal statistic. And the reasons that people visit a coffee shop haven't really changed since this survey's been done. I think for the last 7 or 8 years, the top 4 reasons for people visiting a coffee shop haven't changed at all. The top one is location. The second is quality of the drink. Then it's habit, and then it's a loyalty scheme. Those 4 things have been the top 4 things for the last, ever since the research has been done. Interestingly, the reason that people don't go back to a coffee shop are not the direct opposite of those. The reason people don't revisit are about quality and taste. 60% of people say they won't go back if the quality's not good or if the coffee doesn't taste right. 30% won't go back if it's not clean. If the hygiene of the place is not right, if that hygiene factor isn't right, the toilets are dirty, or they watch the barista, wash their hands and all that sort of stuff, and they grind everywhere. So the 30% won't go back. And very interestingly, and this figure is growing all the time, 27% of people say they won't go back because of the price. So just a quick question, how many of you run a coffee shop at the moment? Here. Oh, there's one? No, just one, is it? And have you I won't put you on the spot, but when I ask the question, how many, have you put your prices up? Most people we speak to, with current coffee shops, haven't put their prices up in the last 6 months to a year. And the input prices are going up and up and up, but they're afraid to put their prices up because they're afraid to lose their customers. And there's an interesting point which I'll go back to on that. But in terms of coffee, and I was talking to somebody about this earlier around the 5 years ago when you asked somebody what a good cup of coffee was, it was, well, it's too hot or too cold, or it's strong or it's weak, or it's, I like it because of a temperature or something like that. Now, when you talk to people, it's about mouthfeel, it's about milk texture, it's about, aroma, it's around the provenance of the coffee, and more and more people now are becoming experts, becoming coffee connoisseurs. So the market is changing dramatically, particularly in London. And some of the big cities as well, the Manchesters and the Bristols, the market is changing dramatically. The artisanal coffee is really taking a hold, and people are becoming, they are aware of what good coffee looks like. So if you're intending doing a coffee shop and not doing good coffee, then you're in trouble really, because people won't come back. Talking about price, well, at the moment, 78%. Last year, 78% of people said that they were deterred from visiting a coffee shop because of the price. 5 years ago, that was only 23%. So within 5 years, it's moved from 23% to 78%. So 78% of people now say price is being cited as a major reason why people won't come back to your business. But it's not just price; it's value. And I'll talk about that in a second. But so don't get confused with price and value. And the reason that price is now important is that you can get coffee everywhere now. Costa are opening, hundreds and hundreds of units all over the place. I woke up this morning, opened my wardrobe door, and there was a Costa Express. It is that often. They open everywhere. You walk past somewhere today, and it's nothing. There's no Costa. And then you walk there. There's a pod. There's a machine. There's something. So they're opening. They're expanding their brand. They know that they've got to expand their brand. And you've got the likes of Greggs and McDonald's, and you've all seen the McDonald's adverts taking the mickey out of the artisan coffee shops. We've got the recent one with a flat white. Have you tasted the McDonald's flat white? It's bloody awful. I got a photo on my phone actually. I had to get one the other day on a service station, but it's absolutely awful. It's not a flat white, but it is just it's a latte with not much milk really. But nevertheless, to 90% of the population. They are happy to have a reasonable cup of coffee now, and they're happy in an emergency to go somewhere like that to get a half decent cup of coffee. The Greggs, the Pret a Manger's, because it's fast. Even the pubs, the Wetherspoons, and the Loungers of the world. So people will do that, and obviously the pods as well. Everyone's got a pod at home now. Well, statistically, it's tripled in 5 years, from 12% 5 years ago. 36% of homes now have got a pod machine. And as a coffee shop consultant, that's probably the second question I get asked around how much. First question is how much they cost to open a coffee shop, and the second one is what pod machine would you recommend? Because I'm thinking of buying one at home. And basically, they're all the same. Just it's about the coffees. But pods are educating people, because it's educating people even more about the quality and the provenance of coffee. So we might laugh and we might jest about Nespresso, but they do a fantastic job about telling people where the coffee comes from, how it works, all that sort of stuff. And they are, some real artisan coffee pods now. There's a company called Halo that I know that just raising a load of cash, and they are sort of single origin pods, pure compostable pods. So the market is changing completely there. In terms of food, there's a great opportunity for the independent in food. 40% of people don't buy food in a coffee shop. 40% don't bother buying food in a coffee shop because, if you go to a Starbucks or a Costa or a Nero, it's plastic food. And this is where the great opportunity is for independents. So, you can compete against something they cannot compete with. They cannot compete with homemade food. They can't compete with food that's made on site. They haven't got the supply chain. They haven't got the space. It's not in their business model. They can't do it. So if you've got a really good independent coffee shop with really good food, then you can really compete against the big boys. And that is a real opportunity. And that's where Costa and Starbucks are beginning to struggle a little bit. And in terms of that, it's not about value. It's not about price. It's about value. So people are prepared to pay more for good food. They are prepared to pay a little bit more. If it tastes nice, it looks nice, they know where it comes from, it's got a story. And one of the big things about independence is you need to have a really good story in your business. If it's got all that, the provenance and everything, then people will be. So don't be afraid to charge more. And that goes on to the question earlier around how do you get good staff? Well, obviously you've got to pay more, but how do you pay more if you're not making any money? Well, you need to put the prices up. But how do you put your prices up? Well, you put your prices up by making it look better. So if you can sell something with a bit of garnish, you make it look nicer. If you can do a cocktail, you can do something that's with the provenance, you can charge more for it because it's got a story and it looks nicer. And I think that's where you've got to start. You can't, as an independent, you just cannot, go down the spiral of cheaper, 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 cutting back on. You end up with a cheese sandwich with no cheese in it in the end. So you can't compete with the big brands on price. You've got to compete with them on quality. So when do people go to coffee shops? Well, we all know they probably all go in the morning. 80% of people actually go in the morning. 80% of visits are in coffee shops in the morning. People don't look for lunch at a coffee shop because of the reasons I've already said, and because of speed. And the average spend is £4.39, which is up 7p on last year. Interesting fact. Interestingly, moving to apps, one of the big things this year I think is going to be apps, and we got a couple of app people in the room, and I'm sure Tom will talk about that in a second, but 63% of people now last year used an app, according to them. 30% of those people who used an app visited more frequently. 32% of the people with an app bought more food. And, you just need to look at what McDonald's are doing with apps and what Starbucks, the success of Starbucks in the States actually been an issue for them because they've been so successful with their pay on the go. You end up with a coffee shop where just people stood at the counter waiting for their drink to be served. There's no interaction with the barista, so there's no the whole thing that Starbucks, the engagement with the barista, which they try desperately to get you. We all laugh at them, but they're actually, it's a science for them. But they found that actually the app has actually detracted a little bit from that. They've got a load of sales from it. So the trick, I think, with the app is to get that engagement, that post-transaction engagement and pre-transaction engagement, so to build loyalty through it. Just don't use it as a transactional thing. It needs to be an engagement model as well. Interestingly, recycling was another thing, as you'd imagine. Recycling with a blue planet. This is as strong as it's ever been, as hard as it's ever been, as difficult as it's ever been for everyone to put up with recycling. People won't put up with stuff that's not recycled anymore. So if as a coffee business you're not doing your bit for the planet, then your customers aren't going to be happy. You need, it's everything. Packaging, cups. It's not just the cups. It's not the packaging. It's not the straws. It's the whole thing, the whole environmental impact. And the businesses that get behind that are doing really well in this market, and the ones that are lagging behind are getting really criticised. So there's another real opportunity, because as an independent business, you can react really quickly. You can just get on with it and do it. You don't have to worry about, take a tender from 15 different companies. You can just go out and buy, paper straws instead of plastic ones. You can just go and buy, you can just send your cups back to the recycling centre. Okay, it might cost you a few quid to send it back, but you can do it. You don't have to do it. You don't have to worry about it. You can just make it happen. Interestingly, I'm doing some work with a company called Green Redeem in London at the moment, who they incentivise people. They incentivise people for taking green actions, and then they market your coffee shop based on those green actions. So if you join the scheme, you get advertised to the the customers of Thames Water, who have got a smart meter. If they use less stuff, less water, less electricity, then they get points, and those points can then be redeemed. So there's lots of ways you can join in the green thing without, on top, which you can beat the competitors as well. Crowdfunding was another thing. This wasn't in the research really, but it's really from what I've observed. Crowdfunding the last year, 18 months has gone bananas. There's some people out doing it really, really well. Have you ever seen Gary Usher? Are any of you aware of Gary Usher? It's worth looking him up. He's a Liverpool-based restaurateur. He's got about 7 sites now. He's built his whole business up on crowdfunding, but he's an absolute master. The issue with crowdfunding is, of course, for the independents, is that crowdfunding by its nature is global. So if you want to crowdfund something globally, then that's the whole world can help you. But if you're opening an independent coffee shop, how do you get enough people locally, and how do you attract enough people locally? But Gary Usher's done a great job at doing that. So if you're thinking of crowdfunding, then that would be a good place to start. And one thing that came out of the research was that it was the beginning of the fifth wave of coffee. So, if you know the first, second, third, and fourth. So the first is the sort of 60s and 70s instant coffee. The second is the branded chains that appeared in the early sort of 90s. Then the artisans in the third wave in the early 2000s. Then we've got the geekiness of coffee. The specialty artisans appeared sort of straight after then. And now we've got which was the science of coffee. And now we've got the sort of the fifth wave, which combines. They describe it as being it's artisan at scale, boutique at scale. So there's some good players out in the market there. Grind are a great example of that, who are able to deliver that boutique experience, but actually deliver it to the masses, consistently, time and time again. And it's a really hard model to do because, they're dealing with baristas, highly trained baristas in the morning, and then they're moving on to, mixologists or whatever you call them in the afternoon when they start on their. As well, they got the food and they got the shininess, and the bright lights and the stainless steel and the copper and the brass or whatever the style is at the moment. That's what they have. But that seems to be what is the next big thing in coffee. If you look at Black Sheep, they're famous for one thing. Being famous for one thing is probably something I would recommend to all of you. If you're thinking of starting a coffee shop, you need to think about one thing that you can be really good at. One thing that you can hang your hat to, one thing that you can be Instagram for, one thing that people will talk about. Don't try and be all things to all men, because those days are gone. All generally, the duck and waffles of the world, the patty and buns of the world, they all do one thing really well, and that's probably what you need. The coffee, your chocolate. You do the chocolate really well. You're renowned for your chocolate. So that's what this place is about. So there's no doubting when you come in that you're experts in chocolate. So and that's what you've got to do when you set something up. And then to do that, you've got to tell your story. If you tell your story really well, then you can charge more. And if you charge more, then you can pay more. And if you pay more, you get longer lasting staff, you get lower staff turnover, lower staff turnover equals better service equals more customers and more profit. But the trick is to just ensure that you don't undersell yourself. Get your story right, get your product right. Don't be shy. Don't be afraid to charge what the stuff's worth. You talk to independent people, independent coffee shops, and they'll talk to you for hours about how wonderful everything. How they know the name of the pig that the bacon comes from, and the roaster of that black. They know everything, and then they'll charge the same price as the Costa up the road, or 10 pence more, because they're afraid. It's just, you can't run the business like that. You've got to set yourself up, get your story right, build that story, add value, and then you're able to able to charge more, which will then allow you to pay more. And it's I think that's the beginning of the virtuous circle. So, thank you for listening. If you want to know anything more about the Coffee Shop Bootcamp or the Green Routine Scheme, then have a chat with me afterwards. But if there's any questions, if not, we'll move on to the panel.